17, Wildlife Heritage Committee, Commissioner Wallace, number A, Commission Policy number 11, Heritage Grant Manual, final reading. Commission may take action to adopt the new proposed Commission Policy number 11, Heritage Grant Manual. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looks like Patrick is handing us out the revised policy number 11 after the changes we made yesterday.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I've passed out some revised language for Commission Policy 11. I think it was Rex Flowers that pointed out under procedures that we use the word will instead of with. That's been shown as corrected. And we have some other corrections on here that that I made last night based on a conversation that I had with New after she had a chance to review it. They're mostly minor changes for the most part, but it does help clarify the policy and uses language more consistent with the NAC. And there are copies on the back table for anybody that wants to look at that from what was originally handed out.
Okay. Does everybody have a chance, everybody in the commission have a chance to look at the proposed changes, and is everybody okay with that? Good. Okay. Then I'll go ahead and ask for any public comment. Any public comment on Commission Policy number 11 and the changes? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the Commission if we're ready for motion.
Move to approve Commission Policy number 11 as presented by the Department, with the changes presented by the Department.
As well, okay.
Second.
Have a motion, did I get a second?
Second.
Second, I have a second. Any further questions or comments from the Commission? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 17B, fiscal year 2012 and fiscal year 2011 Heritage Project extensions. Pursuant to NAC 501.340, the Commission may approve requests for extension of 2012 Heritage projects. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has everybody got a copy of it yet? Or no, we're still working.
These are updates, huh? This has the Commission recommendations for B and C. I'm sorry, the committee's recommendations for B and C. And everything else.
Yeah, go with what he's.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I if it pleases the commission, I think we may be better to tackle this as a fiscal year 11 and do that, and then go to fiscal year 12.
Okay.
At the committee meeting on Wednesday, we had, for fiscal year 11, we had 2 requests for an extension. They were project number 1116, the Kelly Creek Water and Wildlife Protection Project, and 1117, the lion depredation in the East Range, Tobin, Stillwaters, Clan Alpines, and Fish Creek Mountain Ranges. After some discussion, we approved the extension for 1116 and denied the extension for 1117. And the extension for 1116 was for $735.27.
Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, do we have any question or comments? Ever have a chance to read it? And
Could I add one comment?
Sure.
On project number 1116, Kelly Creek Ranch, I just wanted to point out that Mr. Zanino came back and asked for to use these additional funds for willows, which is consistent with his project. It's part of that project, but it wasn't itemized in the original budget, so he had leftover money and he was asking to use them for willow reduction, which we thought was consistent with the project and acceptable, but I just want to point that out. It's a little different than what was originally proposed.
Okay.
The original proposal was water enhancement improvement, and the willow, it goes along with that.
Yep.
Okay.
Project 1117, the reason not for approving the extension, I could go over that.
Yeah, I can state my reason for not approving that, and then if Commissioner Robb chooses, he can go with his idea on that. We had some public comment at the meeting on that, and one of my reasons was that this was one of the most controversial issues that number one, that we ended up getting sued over. Number two, the reason that we got for not completing it was drought, which it may or may not have been the case, but I personally didn't feel that project in the first place was sustainable, and when he couldn't finish it within the allotted time period, I just don't see any reason to extend it and create the hassles that we've already been through the first time.
My comments pretty much mirror Commissioner Wallace's.
Okay.
And since that being the case, I know in this particular situation, I believe the reason, as I understood it, is because we've had one of the driest winters and the greatest lack of snow that we've had in at least many, many years, and the fact that he was able to complete the portion of the project that he did, considering the conditions that he did, and in the area in which he did, which was a shockingly small area, and considering before this project, when this project was first initiated, the department came up with some ideas of how many lions there were in the area, and one of the justifications given for it was there wasn't that number of lions in the area, and there couldn't be. Well, when he found, for instance, I believe it was 6 lions in basically one extended canyon area on his one of the area, and that was the amount of lions was greater than the amount of lions were expected to be in the entire mountain range. That was some justification for the project. Also, in retrospective, justification that the projections that there really indeed was a lion problem in the area weren't indeed justified. That has definitely been proven out. Also, this area was prime mule deer habitat before they were almost gone, extirpated from the area virtually, down to very low numbers. And the idea being, possibly, it was lions. That was one theory that came out. And the purpose behind that was to try to figure out, to eliminate some of them in a relatively small area and see whether or not that was indeed the case. By him doing the work he's done here at the most reasonable dollar value of almost any project as far as what was in return, you know, if you had a return for your buck on a project, this was probably it. And the thing is, not only deer, of course, there is the California bighorn sheep in this area. So the fact you're not approving this reallocation, I mean, it's almost nuts. I mean, this project was the best project there was. It was put out there to try it for a couple of years and see, and this is not even allowing it to go ahead and finish. We got the money there. Should not leave it in there. He had some extraordinary circumstances. The fact that he actually got done what he was done, and considering the circumstances, is amazing. Should leave it in there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have one comment, but Commissioner Robb also has something too.
Okay.
I'll let him go first.
Part of my reason for not extending is looking at the project and hearing different public comment on it. I don't believe the prior commission had adopted this, put enough sideboards on it, and it was basically, you know, a guy could take somebody out on a guided hunt and still get this money for it. There was just, it was too open-ended. It didn't fit into a lot of things that we should be doing with wildlife management, and we've had a lot of complaints from other lion hunters on this, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth as a sportsman. And I couldn't imagine if I wasn't a sportsman what taste it would leave in my mouth. So I don't support this project at all, and I'm glad we got the money back.
And my final comment on that too is this doesn't apply to the previous winter, but in fiscal year 11 we had a pretty good winter. You know, maybe this year we didn't, but we had a good winter that year. So I mean, you can't really call it drought. And we got just a blanket letter that said drought, and it was for 2 different projects, and we haven't completed either one. And it was a unanimous decision by the committee. It wasn't just willy-nilly. It was a unanimous decision, and we don't have the other committee members here to get their opinion. But with Commissioner Robb, I'll put my sportsman hat on for this one too, and it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I've heard comments about it outside of the commission and from just people in general going, why did you even do this? Why'd we even go here in the first place?
Well, I was here when this project got approved, and I opposed it then, and I'm certainly not going to vote for any extension of the project, given how I felt about it in the beginning, for all the reasons stated.
Need to redress that.
Commissioner Rain.
Thank you. First of all, a couple of those statements are definitely wrong, completely wrong. You could not be a portion of a guided hunt. That was discussed. It was in the thing. They were not guided hunts, could not be guided hunts, and if he did so, he would likely be prosecuted by law enforcement for doing so. The first year, he only had a very small portion of the year to do it in because it took so long to get approved. It was well into the following calendar year before the funds were ever actually available. I'm trying to remember the exact date, but we're talking end of January, sometime in February, when the funds were actually available. Of course, we would have been able to complete it if he would have been able to get the funds, but due to some obstacles that were placed in his way, a lot by bureaucratically and some that appeared to be placed in his way by the department, doing extra steps in there, trying to, for whatever reason, politics or whatever, they blocked that from getting funds early enough in the year so that he could go ahead and work for more than, I would say, a quarter to a third of the year's season for hunting the first year in 2011. In 2012, that would have been drought. So, you know, would have been correct on 2011. There was no drought, but he didn't have any time. This project didn't start until way late. Thank you.
Okay, Any further commission comment, questions? Any public comment with regard to, now are we, there's 2 pages here, are we going to, is this
We're doing 1 year and then
This is
next
just
year.
fiscal year 11, and we'll deal with fiscal year 12 separately.
Okay, so we're, so with regard to this fiscal year 11, is there any comments from the public? Rex, come on up.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Cab. Washoe voted to not extend either of the projects, feeling that in a 2-year time frame, if the projects couldn't be completed, then money should just go back to the state. Thank you.
Paul?
Paul Dixon, Clark County Cab. This wasn't on agenda as a specific thing that Clark Cab, so I'll be speaking as an individual here, but I did speak during the Heritage Commission conference, the committee meeting, and I feel very strongly, based on the fact that my original lawsuit included these things as things that were a driver for why I started that process, that they shouldn't be extended into the future, and I'll put that here at the state level on the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any additional comment, or do we need a motion?
Move to approve the extension request of 1116 and deny the extension request of 1117 as submitted to the commission by the committee
Second.
for fiscal year 11, just to clarify.
Okay with that
Second,
clarification? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any additional comment, discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes 5-3. Okay.
Okay, for fiscal year 12, we had requests for extensions on 1201, 1205, 1206, and 1218, 1219, 1220, 1221, and 1222, and 1225, 1229, 1230, and I guess I can read the description on each of those if that's what we'd like to have here, but 1201 is the big game capture, transplant, and monitoring program. 05 is the dirt spring enclosure. 06 is a coral springs enclosure. And 18, 19, 20, and 21 are a water development upgrade and surveys of big game projects with limited access. And 25 was a reduction of mountain lion depredation in management area 66, southwest portion, Little Humboldt Ranch, and in the following mountain ranges: East Range, which is Hunt 44, Tobin Range, Hunt 45, Stillwater Range, Unit 182, Fish Creek Mountains 151, and Clan Alpine Mountains, Unit 183. 1229 is a predator control to improve sage grouse nest success and recruitment. 1230 was a population, genetic diversity, and connectivity in Nevada's mule deer. And those were the ones that requested extensions. The committee voted to approve the extensions for 1201, 1205, 1206, 1218, 19, 20, 21, and 22, and 1230. And we voted to deny extensions for 1225 and 1229.
Okay. And I'll ask if there's any questions or comments from the commission with regard to these projects extension requests, and the ones that are being approved, and the ones that are being recommended for approval, and the ones recommended for disapproval.
There's a question on 1210. I know it's not being considered. There's
$2,300 left over. That was on the Indian Valley fence removal project. What do we do with that money? That is it still being held that wasn't allocated?
We'll be dealing with that on agenda item
Okay.
number Part C.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair.
Commissioner Howell, go ahead.
There's no point in me even talking about 1225. You've already voiced your opinion about the project, so that's a given. But 1229, I don't know how we can refuse that. I mean, we've had all kinds of testimony in the last day and a half about sage grouse and what the predators are doing. And this is a perfect project to control these ravens and other predators that are getting into our sage grouse. I mean, I just don't see why in the world we would not accept that one. That shows everybody what we're trying to do in a lot of different areas besides the habitat. You know, we got to take care of the ones that are getting the eggs. I'd like to keep going with 1225 also, but that's a dead horse. There ain't no doubt about that.
Okay, Commissioner Robb?
I'll address the 1229 issue. In the Governor's Sage Grouse Committee, there's been a ton of discussion about the limiting factors, and ravens are a huge portion of the limiting factors. So it's kind of it would seem counterproductive to deny the $40,000. But the way that the project was set up and the information I've gathered through the Sage Grouse Committee, I don't think this project targets what we need to get done with ravens. I would rather see that $40,000 spent on another project to address ravens. But that project, we can't shift the way that project works. Ravens account for 70% of the predation on sage grouse that are nesting. There's no disputing that. But how do we attack the raven problem? It was classified as a war on ravens. But what I found out through the process is there's territorial ravens, there's nomad ravens, and if we go in and remove some of the territorial ravens, and ravens have to be at least 5 years old to start to breed and become nesting and become territorial, and they basically occupy the habitat and don't let anything else in. So if we go into an area and remove the territorial ravens, which a project like this could do, they've seen when you remove the territorial ravens, the next year it doesn't have a positive impact. It has just the opposite of a negative impact because you do not have the territorial ravens, and it gets overloaded with nomadic ravens that aren't territorial. So you can be counterproductive in your removal of ravens if it's not done the right way, and I think this project could lead to counterproductive measures. The raven problem we do need to address. It's kind of like, if it's classified as war, it's kind of like going to war and only shooting the tanks. You need to find a factory where the tank is built if you want to win the war. There's identified factories of garbage dumps, livestock operations that have pits where they put their dead animals and stuff, trash and litter along the road, roadkill on the road. There's multiple things that feed these ravens for 12 or 11 months a year, and they target our sage grouse 1 month a year. We need to start addressing the 11 months to get a handle on our raven problem instead of the 1 month. It's shown range-wide that the ravens are out of control, but it's human-caused factors that have caused the explosion in ravens, and we need to attack those human-caused things instead of attacking the ravens themselves. If we can control that, we take away their factory. If we control their food source and their ability to nest, we can control them. Shooting the birds like you guys want to isn't going to complete what we need to get to help the sage grouse.
Hey, and I might add too that we do have $3 predator money available. We have a permit for 2,000 ravens. We are going to take ravens. We're going to do it strategically in concert with the other factors that Dr. Coates had identified.
Can I follow up there? We had, a lot of discussion about this ahead of time before we approved it. And the bottom line is Wildlife Services is going to do the work. They've been doing it a while. And I got a feeling they got to know what they're doing by now. So
I believe Wildlife Services knows very well how to take ravens, how to take predators. There's no doubt they're good at it. But I think there's biologists and there's biological proof with videos and pictures and everything of how this is occurring, when it's occurring, and where these ravens are coming from. If I'm looking to kill an animal, I'm going to ask Wildlife Services. If I'm looking what's causing the problem, I'm going to ask a biologist studying it. And the biologists studying it are pointing to other things other than what Wildlife Service could take care of. So that's my reason.
Commissioner Strom?
Let's look at this matter of killing territorial ravens as opposed to nomadic ravens. The territorial ravens would seem to me that they would know where the sage grouse are nesting, so therefore they could zero in on the nest. They'd be much more damaging than nomadic ravens that are coming in that don't know where the nests are and have to search around. They wouldn't be nearly as destructive or effective as the ravens who live in the area.
And it's been proven through videos and stuff that the ravens don't really know where the nest is. They don't go identify the egg. They identify the hen walking through her habitat, and if the habitat has been burned out and you don't have enough growth, they can see the hen. As soon as the hen nests, within minutes the raven hits the nest, kicks the hen off, and takes the eggs. They're not targeting the nest, they're targeting a hen. And that's part of our habitat issue. It's proven by science that if you have a stable habitat with enough cover, the ravens are ineffective in that type of hunting for eggs. It's just when you've got low habitat conditions and the ravens can see the birds, that's when their success is up. So, I mean, killing a ton of ravens in one area, they might not have the effect on eggs because the habitat might cover them and they can't see the hens. So there's all these different things that are weighing in there, and we're spending $40,000 hoping it does something. And I think it would be a bad buy for $40,000 without a doubt.
One of the things that Dr. Coates found is that with territorial ravens, they're defending a territory. So you'll have a pair that has a territory that they defend. Once they took those ravens, then the nomadic ones, the juveniles basically, come in without any pushback from the territorial male and female, and the predation rate actually went up. That's why he was very careful to say that you need to be strategic about what you do because you could end up with a worse result. So it's very, very complicated. I don't think anybody here is against taking ravens that are causing sage grouse a problem. It's a question of where you do it and when you do it and how you do it. And when it comes to killing ravens, Wildlife Services is very good at it. There's no doubt about that.
Mr. Rain.
Thank you. You know, it's ludicrous, some of what's being talked about here. That argument is irrelevant almost. It doesn't make any sense. A lot of this territorial ravens talk, we're not talking about, gee, if there's a couple ravens out there, this is an issue. We're talking about when these murders of ravens come in the hundreds and by the thousands. We're not talking about the areas where you got some territorial ravens that are scaring off some other ravens that are coming into the area. If that's the issue, that's not necessarily a huge enough density to maybe cause more than light predation. Although in some cases they indeed can be somewhat severe. But these other areas, we're talking up north, I mean, we're talking here, right where we're sitting right now. There are clouds of ravens that move in. I don't think a couple territorial ravens, more or less, is necessarily going to create a huge difference in that. This money needs to be expended in the best manner possible. This program was not designed to come out and just, we need to go kill some ravens in some areas where maybe or maybe not they do some good. These guys, Wildlife Services, these are biologists, and they are in contact with the other biologists. Every one of them there has degrees, and many of them advanced degrees in wildlife biology and related fields. And they are in contact, and these, part of the requirements of this project was that it be done under the supervision, basically, of the Department of Wildlife. And the Department of Wildlife had to become an integral portion of it. The reason why this was not implemented is politics. And it's a sad statement on society that here we are arguing over this because politics intervened in trying to save the sage grouse. And now we have more politics saying, well, you know, well, it might be a good idea, but, well, you know, science, it isn't. Endowed biologists had a lot of say in this project. And they would have say over how it was expended in exactly which areas. We talked about the units, and we came up in, when we were coming up with this, and a lot of it came up, well, within this area, and then more specifically, within these boundaries, in areas specifically identified by endowed biologists, and that was where it was taken. That was the bottom line on where the money was going to be expended. Was we came up with geographical boundaries, and the rest of it was up to Wildlife Services to work with this Department of Wildlife, in more closely identifying it, the exact areas. This is one reason why this commission, if it sits here and says, well, no, you know, we don't want to do this, we want to go do some other project, you're going to sit here and oversee the doom of many of these industries up here in this area, because by not approving projects like this, and many more like this, we should not only be approving this one, but going well beyond this. Otherwise, these industries up here, and they're not little cottage industries, these are massive industries. These are the mining that is currently feeding the rest of the state in its depression. This is the ranching that sustains us all of the time. Big industries. They are the ones that are going to suffer for poor decisions such as not approving the extension of projects like this and creating many more like them.
And Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I have is, we could probably discuss the merits or the drawbacks to this project forever. But the project was approved for the money to be spent by now, and it hasn't been. So could the committee shed some light on that, on how come this project wasn't finished? Did you guys get an explanation as to why the money wasn't expended by now?
For the record, Patrick Cates. This was a project that had come the previous year, and I'm trying to remember if it came forward the year before that or not. But there were delays in contracting. This project had to come back to the commission to be revised, so that it did have some parameters so that the department could direct the funds in a productive way. So there was some delay in doing that because it had to come back to the commission. Then we had to go through the state contracting process. I believe it was in that time frame that the lawsuit was filed for the heritage projects, and I know at one board of examiners the Attorney General pulled those contracts for further review with her office, and then it was later brought back and approved. It was, you know, 9 months or so after the fiscal year before those finally got approved. So the projects were kind of a year behind. It's taken them a year to spend each chunk of money, and that's the reason no money has been expended on this.
Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I had the same question as Pete. And using that information, you know, there was a lot of time that was burnt that nothing got done. But I still looked at it as though we didn't spend a dollar, even after we got through all of the rigmaroles of the lawsuit and the contracts and everything else. And then when Commissioner Robb came forth with the information that he had from the Sage Grouse Committee, that just pushed it over the top for me that we know we hadn't already put money expended any money on this, so maybe it was time that we just go on to something else. And that was where I was coming from on that. Because we didn't even, there was no, I had no inkling that we were even doing anything at the time, right now. Like, to me, right now, today, if something was going on, I should have been informed of that during the committee meeting to say, hey, we've got this going on right now. We're actually doing something on the ground, and we have nothing. And to me, that was enough to say, you know what, as to just keep extending it and extending it for a long time, I'd just as soon see it go into some other projects that maybe were short some money or needed it and could use it now, as to let it go back into the fund to never see the light of day again.
Okay. Okay, that's our commission comment. I think I need to take this out to the public. I lost track there. Is that where I'm at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Need to take this out to the public. Any public comment on this particular item?
Here for the record, John Carpenter, and this project was delayed a long time, and it never got started. And they've done all the work this year in the time span that they have to do it. I just talked to the people that were doing this, and they've done it all for this year. And they do it where NDOW tells them to go. They do this control work where NDOW tells them to go. And it's very efficient. And I can tell you, because I've lived this deal, if you don't do predator control on these ravens and other predator control work, you're going to lose these sage grouse. There's no question about it. Somebody said 70% are taken off the nests and while they're chicks. But what I've read, all the science, and I think it comes from Dr. Coates, it's 80%. And so we just heard here that that they want to keep the hunting take down below 10%. So if you take 10% of these by hunting, you've already taken 80% by predators. You're never going to keep this bird the way we want it to be kept with 10% chick survival. It just will not happen. You've got to do this predator control. When we had the greatest number of sage grouse, we had all kinds of livestock, and we had adequate predator control. We had thousands and thousands of sage grouse. And to kill this project now is just not right, because they've done a lot of good. And yeah, you can talk about covering the dumps and things like that. Can you imagine the amount of money that it's going to cost these cities and towns and counties to keep these dumps covered? It's going to cost an enormous amount of money. And yeah, you can talk about picking up the roadkill and all that, which is fine. But who's going to do that? Put 100 highway patrol out there from here to Jackpot or wherever? You got to think about the cost of these things that they're talking about. People going out here and shooting these squirrels and that, they're not going to pick them up. Maybe you can do something about the perching deal. But what would work the best is to get rid of those ravens that are there
and then go up and destroy those nests or whatever you want to do. But I'm telling you, if you don't do predator control, you're going to lose the sage grouse war. And you can talk about habitat. We've been doing habitat for years. When I was in the ranching business, I fixed all kinds of springs. I'm the first guy in Elko County, and maybe in Nevada, that done a range and allotment management program. And I'd done it on my own because it was the thing that had to be done. BLM said, go ahead. I hired a range con to help me. I put in all the fences. I done all the water development that had to be done. And we created a grassland that looked like Montana here. But that grassland also created a humongous amount of fire, what it take to burn. And so the NYTC kids, or somebody was out here, the NYTC, or maybe you know where it is, maybe you don't. They let one of their trash cans get away from them. They burnt this whole country here from Elko clear to the top of the mountain out here, which was my range. And that was because of all of the fire fuel that was there. And you talk about this, the stubble height and everything, that's fine. But it's going to burn because you've got all that fuel there. You've got all the brush. I don't know how you stop that. Because, you know, when we get these lightning storms coming through here like we do, and the winds, there's nobody in the world that can stop these fires. So we gotta, you know, I guess I'm off the subject, but please do not stop this project because we need it. In Elko County here and that, you know, we're the ones that are going to get hurt by this if this bird's listed. Our mines, our ranches, our hunters, everything. And please do not, I beg you, do not stop this project. Because they're doing it, the Fish and Wildlife Services, or the whatever you want to call them, they're going where NDOW wants them to go. It's not enough of a program, but it's something. And it's got to be a lot more. And I can tell you, please don't stop this project. We need to add to it. And the county here is going to be willing to help you because they understand predator control and things that we need to do. So please don't stop this project. It got put behind because of politics, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I know the reason. So please don't stop this project.
Thank you. Don, come on up. Don? You. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Don Mulderino, please do stop the project. Let me tell you a couple of things about ravens. I got interested in ravens about 10 years ago, maybe, when I noticed that Wildlife Services was indeed efficient at killing ravens. In fact, going through their numbers and tallying them up, Nevada Wildlife Services was killing 3/4 of all of the ravens killed in the entire United States. We brought this to the attention of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and some of the conservation organizations. Wildlife Services lost their unlimited raven killing permit. The permit was reissued at, I think, $1,800 a year. NDOW has figured a way around that by getting their own raven killing permits. So now Wildlife Services can use NDOW's permit and go after about 3,800 ravens a year, which is a considerable reduction over what they were doing for years and years on an unlimited permit prior to the time we blew the whistle on them. And so there was raven killing going on for many years in Elko County at very high rates, since for some reason Nevada Wildlife Services kills a lot of ravens. No question about that. The second thing to say about ravens is that Dr. Coates, one of his professors, was Dr. Claybenow, who did all kinds of field research on poisoning ravens regarding sage grouse productivity for many years, and he's appeared in front of this commission from time to time during his retirement years to remind you that when you poison ravens, you indeed can produce some extra chicks out of the nest. However, those chicks don't make it to adulthood. They don't produce adult birds. The chicks die of many other things before they ever get to be adults. And I suspect that that situation is probably classic for random poisoning of ravens. And I suspect it speaks loudly for being selective in how you try to exert raven control in certain situations where you don't want to make things worse, but better. So that's my raven lecture for the week. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional public comment? Rex?
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Advisory. We voted to deny extensions for 12-25, -29, and -30. Basically, on 29 and 30, it was because the projects had not been started in a year's period of time. 25 was one of those projects that we never did support from the very beginning at Washoe County. We also voted to ask for an extension for projects 1205, 1206, and 1218. And on a personal note, I would really like to see you put enough money out of this available fiscal year 12 reallocation monies available on 1218 through 1222 to fund those at 100%. Those are water projects, on the ground water, the staff of life. These sheep can't live without it. Thank you.
Paul?
For the record, Paul Dixon speaking on behalf of myself. I heard Commissioner Rain speak. We're affecting the mining industry. We're affecting the cattle industry. And I'll look to Commissioner Morai. Exactly how much money are the cattle industry and the mining industry putting into this raven control issue that will affect sage grouse and affect us when it's their livelihood and they're expecting sportsmen to fund everything on our backs? And to me, that's just B with a big S at the end of it. If they are so invested and they're going to be so impacted, and they have the resources much greater than the sportsmen in this state and what we have in our heritage account or other things, they ought to be ponying up double, triple dollars to this because their livelihoods are impacted. And I don't see them doing it. They want us to bear it on our backs. And when I see them step up to the table and put the kind of money that we've even put into this date over the last 10 years into this, then I'll have a different opinion on things of whether or not they should have a voice here saying what we should do with our heritage funds, because I don't believe they do. I think they want us sportsmen to pay for it, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? Mr. Carpenter, I let you speak well beyond 3 minutes. Okay, so I think we got the message. I'm going to bring it back to the commission. Go ahead, Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can respond to Mr. Dr. Dixon's comments there. I'm a member of the N1 Grazing Board, and the funding from that grazing board comes from grazing fees, and Wildlife Services comes to that grazing board, and money is expended to Wildlife Services to the extent of permitting for 1,500 ravens. They come twice a year for that. So in answer to your question, the livestock industry is providing money and working on the same thing that we're doing here that the sportsmen are doing. They're providing funding for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace?
I just wanted to also respond a little bit to Rex was talking about Project 1230, and my first thought when I saw it too was the big fat goose egg in the expenditure, because that was the same thing that it did to me for 1229. Was if you're not going to even start on it, then why are we doing it? But the difference being 1230, they provided to us that they had taken numerous amounts of samples, and in in a way to save money, they're going to run these samples all at the same time in order to avoid spending extra money. They could do more at one time. That was my understanding, is that.
Okay.
So that was why I felt that 1230 could go ahead and move on, as they'd already had the time and the effort invested in the sampling. It just hadn't run it and build for the project. So that's where I was at on that one, which you probably didn't have that information, so.
No, is there a discount to run them all at once?
I would imagine, I can't speak to that, but that would be my.
I can tell you on analytical services that there is. I deal with it every day.
There's also an issue brought up that the integrity of the analysis would be better if you sampled everything at once, as opposed to multiple times.
Okay. Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, my perception of the project of 12-29 was largely conceptual. Okay, I think a lot of them are in some respect, but the fact that it had so many bumps in the road, call it politics or whatever you want, the fact that the Board of Examiners pulled it off to the side, how often does that happen? To me, speaks volumes. You can go after the folks that sit on the Board of Examiners if you'd like, but you know, I suspect that they had some pretty good reasons. We all demand accountability in here, and the irony is that when a project such as this gets called out for accountability, all of a sudden it becomes politics, and I find that real ironic. So you have a turd of a project, gets called out, gets modified, now we have a polished turd.
Commissioner Raines.
All right, since we have an expert in the audience and one might be able to answer one of these questions that were brought up, what the grazing industry, the cattle industry, I believe, has been putting some money into this for a good number of years, and perhaps, and I believe also that there's been some, at least discussion, I know, with the mining industry about this, and perhaps we could get some better numbers on that and the length of time that could happen. If I asked Assemblyman Carpenter if you could tell me a little history on that, how much the cattle industry has been putting into that. I believe you're an expert on that subject.
Oh, we've taken public comment.
We have asked Mr. Dixon again on multiple questions. You can ask questions of members of the audience. And this is asking a specific question about the history of this particular project, which was brought up by Mr. Dixon, who has been asked and responded during questioning from the commission.
Mr. Chairman, we've allowed Dr. Moldy to come up here and speak repeatedly, and why are we denying Mr. Carpenter?
Mr. Carpenter came up and spoke.
He should be allowed to speak again. Mr. Moldy comes up here and speaks.
One time for every agenda item so far.
Isn't fair?
One time for each agenda item.
The commission, I'm asking a question from an expert in the audience on this particular item who has specific historical expertise in this particular area on how much the grazing industry has been spending in predation control, specifically dealing with ravens over history. Because that has been one of the items of which was brought up as a justification for denying item 1229. We asked staff, we happen to have a historical expert.
I think that the issue came back to the commission, and Commissioner Morai satisfied me that the cattle industry is dealing with raven control.
Right.
I am absolutely convinced of that, and I don't need to pile on. And we got time limits here. We got to keep moving on.
All right. Well, then, if you're not going to allow our expert assemblyman to respond to these things, then I will go ahead and state that since I don't have the exact numbers that he might, it is my understanding that this industry has been putting money towards these items for more than a century. The Department of Wildlife has been putting money towards this specific endeavor in much smaller amounts, vastly smaller amounts for a vastly shorter length of time than the cattle industry in specific, and I do believe that there is some issues with the mining that they are indeed working on stepping on the table. However, the obstacle in this discussion is the Department of Wildlife, because the Department of Wildlife has to approve many of these items. Just like this 29, let there be no doubt, it was the Department of Wildlife, not the Commission, the Department of Wildlife that was the obstacle, that was the reason it was pulled off. It was strict, it had nothing to do with the review or anything else, or a turd being polished or one way or the other. It was pure, dirty, selfish politics. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional commission comment?
I don't think they're further anybody's argument one way or the other, so I'd just soon get going on this.
I do believe it was politics, though. I really do. And you can look at that from two different sides.
From all sides, yes.
Right. Okay. Commissioner Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this, but the question, I may see it a little bit different than the rest of the commission here. The question in my mind is not whether this project was a good project, a bad project, or any argument over the Raven deal. What I've tried to break it down to is what is the right thing to do. And it is possible that through this process there was a bunch of time wasted that created a situation that did not allow them time to complete the project in the allotted time frame. And that's kind of what I'm struggling with right now, more than the argument about the project itself, because going back over the history of the applications of the projects and the way they were granted and everything, I had question over that also. But that's kind of where I sit on it.
Okay, and just to address that, and in my mind, the issue of Raven control, after hearing the studies from Dr. Coates, with regard to Raven control, I think that the Department of Wildlife and supported by this commission are going to do whatever we need to do with regard to Raven control, through our existing predator management projects and processes that we have, and that those projects will be designed accordingly to deal with the Raven issue as it pertains to the sage grouse. But I don't see a need to continue to approve this project, because I see it as different. It's just killing ravens. It's just allowing Wildlife Services to just do what Wildlife Services does without any, any attempt to really get to what the issue is with the sage grouse that has been identified, through some of these later, studies with regard to ravens and the impacts on sage grouse. I would rather us deal with the predator control issues with regard to with regard to sage grouse raven interactions, and do that through our normal processes, as opposed to through these heritage funds. Commissioner Moy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we run through this? Could the committee go through it again, and so I could be clear here on following what actually happened and when it happened? This project was the request was for $50,000. On what date?
That would have been the initial. It was a request of $50,000 for the initial heritage project. When it was awarded by the commission, it was awarded $40,000. Correct?
Yep. A year ago at the meeting last year.
And then we've gone through the timeline. I'm a little messed up on too, but lawsuit, there was It's been drug out for 9 months.
If you go back to fiscal year 10, I believe it was, that was the first project for Raven Control. Those were the set of projects that were subject to the lawsuit. So it would have been in June of 2009 when that was originally approved by the commission. Then we had a rewrite of those projects. It was this one as well as some other predator control projects. That came back to the commission in the fall. And then the contract finally went forward to the Board of Examiners in 2010, and I can't remember the exact dates, but it was around December 2009. It was polled, and I think it came back in like January or February before it was finally approved by the Board of Examiners. So that FY10 project, and meanwhile, an FY11 project came forward at the end of that year. That was funded. Because of the delays in the FY10 project, that project was extended into FY11. The FY11 project spent a little bit of money in FY11, and it was also extended into FY12. In fact, it's listed on your FY11 list. That's 11-20. So that was already extended by a year. You can see most of that money, only a small portion of it was spent in actual 11. So you got to go back 3 years, but basically they lost almost a whole year in that cycle of doing those projects. Meanwhile, the next year a new project could be approved, the old one would get extended, and we had them spending the old money first.
Okay, then did they ever have an opportunity, because I thought that was how the chain kind of went, did they ever have an opportunity in any year? This was in 40,000 increments then, is that right?
Yeah, I think they were all 50,000 a piece. It was requested. Yeah.
Plus 23 or 4,000 of. This is a very complicated deal. There was never any slowdown in predator raven control. Okay, you have $100,000 from Heritage plus another 25 or 30 of the predator fee money. Okay, so they spent 60,000 of the 100 grand that they were allocated. 40,000 has not been expended, but we still had 25,000 of predator money that is trying to be spent. We basically outstripped their ability, based on staffing, to spend all that money that was allocated.
And the Raven quota.
We were limited to 1,500 ravens, and I wrote a letter requesting it to be moved from 1,500 to 2,000. So that also played into the mix. On an annual basis, Wildlife Services has to report how many ravens they actually kill.
Let me help a little bit. Just, you know, for the record, Larry Gilbertson, Department of Wildlife, Chief of Game. Yeah, that's really what happened is the predator fee program was paying for raven control. And then the commission decided to start adding on some heritage dollars to up raven kill. Well, at the time, Wildlife Services wasn't even using all of our approved predator money because they had man time limitations and they had the raven quota limitations. So then, as the Wildlife Commission approved extra dollars to try to help and remove more ravens, as Dr. Moldy pointed out, we worked to get the raven quota increased through the Fish and Wildlife Service. And so all of these things, the money backed up essentially from Wildlife Heritage. And we were, if I remember, Patrick, we were expending the previous year's Wildlife Heritage raven money was being carried forward. But we never, the confusion here is I keep hearing that politics or something stopped our raven control project. Never did. We never stopped it. We paid for it with predator funds until we were able to pay for it with heritage funds. And so we've done raven control every year. And we've upped and increased the raven quota. And I was talking to Joe Bennett from Wildlife Services yesterday, and he was telling me that based on last year, they did hire an extra person to help them do this project. And he thinks that they need in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 to do it if we want to do it the same next year as we did this year. And we can move money around within the predator, the $3 fee project if we need to help cover that. So there are currently we haven't suspended raven control, and there's no current plans to suspend it for this coming year.
Commissioner
That brings up more questions. I mean, it sounds like we've got enough money to hit the cap that they let us shoot a year, but then I'm not questioning Commissioner Morai's money from N1 Grazing Board, but if we're giving money, N1 Grazing Board's giving money, it should be we have too much money because we can't kill enough ravens.
I think that the grazing board money is directed at livestock depredation, because ravens do cause problems with calves and whatnots, and that's where they're focused, at raven issues with livestock.
So they're depredating ravens.
Correct.
Don't count against our cap.
No.
Against the 2,000 permit, my understanding is that there's an additional 1,500 permitted for livestock protection. So we're at 3,500, not the 2,000. We're not limited to that 2,000, and one would be stealing from the other one, so to speak, or that we have to include all the money into the 2,000.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to make sense of it in my own head. Thank you for that explanation.
I guess my question is that, did the proponent of this project ever have the chance to catch up? The delay came from what you said, Patrick, was in 9. And so at any point in time, if there was additional money, did they never had a chance to catch up because of the permitting process? Is that the way it went because Wildlife Services couldn't take any more of them? You understand what I'm trying to find out?
Larry Gilbertson, Chief of Game for the record, but basically that's what happened is we were covering raven control with $3 predator fee fund. We had an annual raven control project. And then the Wildlife Commission approved wildlife heritage projects to increase that effort. And then we went through the various difficulties of getting it approved and having that permit increased. And if I'm not mistaken, we increased it 500 one year, and then I think an initial 500 or 1,000 the next year. In one year, we went in between during the process, and we did a rush thing and increased the permit so that we could continue on. But we never had to stop because we never had to stop raven control. We were able to do it every year. But that's what happened. So what we ended up doing is spending, I think fiscal $10 finally got approved and moved forward, and I think we're using fiscal $10 from a heritage project in fiscal 11, and then they approved another fiscal 11 heritage project to do it again, and so we ended up using, that got carried forward, and I think that's why we ended up with this balance, is we had enough to cover it. We didn't need more, essentially.
They were killing everything up to their permit.
Up to the permit. We had enough money to get up to the permit, so we didn't need more, and so it kept getting carried forward is what happened.
It really boils down to, do you want to spend heritage money on this or predator fee money on it? That's what this is really all about. And it has nothing to do with politics.
So going forward, if this isn't funded this way, the raven control projects can still go forward under your direction up to our cap.
Correct.
That's all we needed to know.
Okay, Commissioner Wallace?
And just probably spinning my wheels here, but this discussion has taken me in a completely different direction, and now I'm looking at it from the point that we've just kept awarding money to the point that we can't spend it, which to me solidifies the fact that we shouldn't carry it over. We should take it and put it into some projects where we can get some good out of it, because we're just drowning in money to kill ravens, is what it feels like to me. And
Commissioner Moore.
Okay, I'm sorry to spend so much time on it.
All right, I want you to get it right.
But with what was just said here, when we upped it to 2,000 on the permitting, it sounds like to me that we were at the cap, that we were actually doing the work. Wildlife Services was doing the work to reach the cap.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not in jeopardy no matter what we do here today. We're still gonna, if we use predator money, we have an assurance that we're still gonna get to 2,000.
That would be the goal, yes.
I would say that this commission needs to, and the department needs to make sure that we hit that cap.
But hit it the right way in the targeted areas.
Exactly. I think what Commissioner Rob is talking about is that based on Pete Coates' work, we need to make sure we're doing it the right way. And we have the ability to take up to 2,000 ravens. That should be in combination with perching, nest destruction if possible. Some habitat work that's going on the habitat side of things, all combined, focused on those key areas. Dumps, working with counties. The livestock industry could certainly help in knowing where these animal pits are. That would where we might want to target removal of ravens at the right time of the year. See, we didn't want Wildlife Services taking ravens in January. We wanted it during the nesting season.
And Wildlife Services is the only ones who can do that work, do the raven work with the eggs, because they're the only ones that are allowed access to.
We contract with them. I suppose we could contract with somebody else, but we've tried to keep it with Wildlife Services. They have insurance. They can get on both federal. They have permits for federal ground and private. So I mean, it makes things a lot simpler in the world of.
Thank you. If I remember correctly, part of the problem here was that the proponent, the person that put in for the project, the submitter, basically wanted to contract with Wildlife Services, but they couldn't. So then part of the problem, and this is what I mean by somewhat of an ill-conceived plan because of the contract issues, they needed the department to contract with Wildlife Services. So there was a lot of leveraging going on, and the problem is that you had an entity that couldn't wheel and deal with Wildlife Services, submit a plan, get some money, and then they couldn't spend it. They couldn't spend it properly because there wasn't a pathway forward. Am I wrong or right?
Absolutely right. And so we did.
The leveraging began to leverage the department to line them up and get them in order so that the entities that put in for this, the Nevada Alliance for Wildlife, could leverage the department to contract with Wildlife Services for this work. And there's something inherently wrong with that, and it got called out. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
It was ill-conceived, it wasn't lined up, and there's other ways of doing this. If we got predator problems with ravens in sage-grouse areas, there's just way more ways, there's way better ways of handling it, and that's not gonna solve our problem by giving the money back. So just the fact that we've talked about it for so long tells me a lot that I need to know. We're trying to shove a square peg through a round hole.
Good with you. So just to make it clear in my mind, there's money available. If we transfer this money to other projects, there's still going to be money available to take the 2,000
predator fee money.
I might as well.
Commissioner Ray?
That may or may not be true. I would like to know that because I haven't seen the one for last year, let alone the one for this next coming year. The one for this next coming year, generally we would see at this time of year. We should have at least a draft copy of that at this meeting. We should have had a committee meeting before this meeting to go over that draft copy so it could be finalized at the next meeting. And then we'd be able to answer that question. However, we're not able to answer that question because none of that's happened. And we still don't have the one for last year. So those assurances are, well, we don't have one for last year, don't have one this year. How can we have any assurance whatsoever? The one assurance we do have is it was a very good project. It's had some very beneficial effects. And I'd like to have such in the future. But if the commission doesn't want to see sage grouse progress, that's the purview of the commission.
I
disagree, and we all disagree, and that's okay.
I want sage grouse to go forward as much as anybody, and there's nobody in this room that doesn't want to see them survive. What does it cost per bird? Just, I mean, do you have, I mean, how much does 40,000, if we got a 2,000 bird limit, What does that 2,000 birds usually cost us?
The research shows that somewhere between 7 and 11 eggs to kill a raven. That's what the service, Fish and Wildlife Service, wants to use as the number you divide in. So if you put out 7 eggs, we chose something a little less than 7. And so it depends on how many eggs can be treated, how much time to drive out to the site for the person to put the eggs out, because a lot of other things eat these eggs. And it's a corvicide, so it only affects ravens. It doesn't go up the food chain or get into any other animals, but badgers eat them, squirrels eat them, there's all kinds of things. So I can't tell you how much Wildlife Services it costs them to send a person out and spend all day treating the eggs before they go out and putting them in the right area and making sure they are in the right area. So I really can't tell you that.
Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion. And in fact, I'd like to make some specific requests on this motion. I'd like to have an initial motion that approves the projects that the committee is recommending for approval. And then I want to isolate these 2 additional projects in separate motions for disapproval. That's how I'd like to proceed. So, okay. Entertain those motions. Go ahead.
I move to approve an extension request for project number 1201, 1205, 1206, 1218, 1219, 1220, 1221, 1222. Wait a minute, I'm looking at the wrong one here. Let me start over. Approve the extensions for project 1201, 1205, 1206, 1218, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 1230.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 5-3. Okay, so let's do 1225. Need a motion on 1225?
Would you like to do them separately? Is that
Yes,
what
I
you're
would.
aiming
Yeah,
for? Okay. I move to deny the extension for project 1225 for fiscal year 12.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we hadn't really discussed this particular one. This was a fabulous project. Indeed, it's probably the best use of money that's come out of any of our programs. We're talking about lion control, dollar per dollar. This was cheaper than anything else we've had and has been tremendously successful. Unfortunately, the only problem with this was, exactly as the proponent, the reason he asked for it was with the driest winter on record. My understanding is that there was by no stretch of the imagination due to a lack of animals in the area, and the area that is specific, that you, by voting this down, you will be dooming many of the California bighorn sheep and deer in the area to an untimely death, and you will be suppressing that population basically in perpetuity. Thank you.
Okay, any additional discussion, comments? Okay, call for motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 5-3. Okay.
All right, I move to deny an extension for project 1229, fiscal year 12.
Second.
Any additional discussion, comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 5-3.
You don't have to state which was the 3. Is that clear?
Just kidding.
I don't think so. Okay.
A little humor, Mike, a little humor.
Is that in on the extensions?
Yes.
That's
Okay.
it on the extensions.
Okay, let's move on to 17C, fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 11, heritage funding reallocation for possible action. pursuant to NAC 501.300, the commission may approve reallocation of unused heritage funds from a previously approved 2012 project to any other previously considered 2012 project application.
Okay. My paper right. The committee, based on our recommendations, we reallocated some of that money based on, so now since we went with the committee's recommendations, I can lay out what we did. And what we did was using, for reallocation, we had money available in a total of $102,226.58. And using the projects that we approved extensions for, we reallocated $40,800 to Project 1201, the Trap and Transplant Program. And we reallocated $8,000 to Project 1218, a water development upgrade. And they actually had 9932, but we had Paul Harris participated in the meeting and said that he only needed 8,000. So that's why we didn't give them the full amount there on that one. And then on 1219, 20, 21, and 22, we made those full funding of 3447 for each of those 4 projects to give them their full initial 5947 that they had requested for those surveys. And that was the only ones that we had extensions for at that time. And the committee asked Patrick to see if any of the other Project 12 needed any extensions or could use some of that money. And that included some of the projects that did not even get approved initially. So, and today he's just given us some results of people that responded to his request. And did you give to the entire commission this?
I just marked up your copy, just yours and Jack's as committee members.
Okay. So
I don't have hard copies from the folks, but I can go through it.
What he's got as a response is 1201, which we went ahead and reallocated the 40,800. They responded as interest. 1223 also did, saying they could take all or part of. Was that one funded at all?
No, that one didn't receive any funding.
So they could take all or part of whatever we could give them.
That was Great Basin Consulting, Lloyd Rathburn.
And then 1232 Bud Brown Tuladad project.
Also received no funding initially.
But said they could use 15,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
1235 responded and said they could use 6,000.
That had been funded. I think that would take them up to the full request amount.
Okay. 1236 responded and said they could use any amount. 1237 responded and said $8,499 or any amount.
Could I just, both of those projects, 36 and 37, didn't receive any funding, and 37, their request. This is UNR, Dr. William Longland and Allison Andresen. This is a kill rates and prey selection for mountain lions in Nevada. What they said in their response was that they had procured alternative funding for most of this project. What they were interested in as part of this project that wasn't in their original proposal was funding for 2 ATVs to help them do their work. So what they asked for is a little bit different than what they'd originally proposed, but all part of the same project. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay, and 1238, assessment of movement patterns of waterfowl in Air Mountain West. Chris Nicolai for 20,000. And 1239, the Horse Spring Wildlife Habitat Improvement and Fire Resistant Seeding, Daniel Martinez, for any amount. So basically what we've got are those are the ones that we could reallocate some of the money. and past our proposed reallocations, that left us with a balance of $39,638.58 that we could reallocate to some of these projects in order to use that fiscal year 12 monies without it going right back to the heritage account.
And Commissioner Wallace said the committee recommended that. I'd like to think I was that smart, or Commissioner Wallace, or Deputy Director Kate, but it was Rick Smith that came up with the idea of looking for those projects, and kind of took us all by surprise, because I was under assumption, I think we're all under the assumption that $39,000 was going back into the principal. When it goes there, it's lost money. And Rick hit us with the concept, and we all shook our head and thought no, and then looked further, and it turned into a yes. So I think it's a good use of $40,000 that we were going to lose. Not lose, but it's going into an account we can't use.
And if I could just add, just kind of procedurally what we did, it was a great suggestion from Rick Smith, and I did have time yesterday to review what we did with DAG New, and seems like that passed muster. Under NAC 501.300 subsection 3, the commission has authority to reallocate any money in a year when they determine that that money is available. And you can either do a call for new projects, or you can consider projects previously considered. Because we are a week away from the end of the fiscal year, there really wasn't time to go out and do a whole nother call for new projects. So what we did is my staff sent out an email on Thursday, the morning after the Heritage Committee meeting, to every project proponent from FY12, and told them how much money was available, what the committee had recommended, and asked them to assert to us whether they were still interested in funding for that project, whether it could go forward, and if they would request an extension to move that project into the next fiscal year. And that's the response that we received. It went to everybody that applied in 12.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Patrick here.
Go ahead.
If that's the case, then do we need to approve extensions for the, I mean, do you have letters requesting an extension for these?
Yes, they request, if the ones I circled, they all requested extensions of us. And
So we would have to approve that, though?
yes, you will need to approve those extensions if you choose to allocate them additional funds.
Question? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
On the Fraternity of the Desert Bighorn projects, I was understanding that those projects are already completed at this point. Is that correct? Because they'd already expended the other funding, and I know that when these were approved in those amounts, it was given an understanding from somebody there, I mean, it's been a year, but it stated that they would procure funding for the rest of it, and since the timeline for that project is well before now, and they've already expended this other money, are we basically reimbursing them for expenditures that they've made out of some other fund, or?
For 1218, the water development upgrade, my understanding from testimony at the committee was